My next question to you is just a really quick one on sequencing.
Mhm.
Now, I sort of spoke about this last week as well. I'm just interested of how people are doing it, whether you're sort of doing an introduction period, if you were to do it in your past, how long do you spend on it? Do you not? Do you then what? Do you go straight into sort of education, then into the option topics? Just sort of like a rough sort of. If you imagine you had 5 hours a week, I think most teachers do. What is the sort of
Yeah.
rough idea sequence? Is my question to you.
My general sequencing, right? I mean, like many people, I will start with 2 or 3 weeks of setting the scene. What is sociology? What are the key concepts? What is gender? What is ethnicity? What is social class? Let's demonstrate some differences in how people are treated based upon their social class, gender, ethnicity. Let's look at some of the theories, very gentle introductions to theories. Marxism is this, functionalism is this, feminism is this, which incidentally we've just done a free course for students on. Again, I feel like I'm just plugging stuff on this now with Tutor to You. And also those videos are available on YouTube for you to use in your classroom. But so I would do a gentle 2 or 3 weeks. I go with research methods first. And
Okay,
there's a rationale
why?
behind going
Go on then.
behind
I want to
research
hear the
methods.
rationale. I want to hear the rationale because I haven't. I've done that, but not suggesting that I'm right. I've gone for the 3 week introduction for the same reasons you have, but I'd like to see
Hmm.
what your rationale is. Mine's more just I think, oh, research methods. But go for it.
Yeah, well, I think so. Like everybody does that. Everybody sort of like looks and goes research methods. Oh, I think research methods can potentially be one of the better modules to teach. I think it can be more interactive. I think it can be more fun for students. It can, and particularly because I taught in FE, so a lot of the students who were coming to me didn't know each other. They didn't know each other. They were very much isolated. Your first 2 3 lessons, nobody would speak. Everybody was too afraid of everybody else. But when you do research methods and you make it a little bit more interactive, you're able to sort of kind of break down some of those kind of barriers. So you start to get people doing things, just simple things like questionnaires, or getting them to make judgments and decisions based upon data that they've been given. I also use research methods really because then I'm going to embed research methods all the way through the course, and particularly through the education module. Because if you've got the background of research methods here, then when you go into education, which is the second module I would do, you can start to look at specific pieces of research and say, right, okay, this piece of research was used a structured questionnaire. What might be some of the problems that teachers had? Sorry, what might be some of the problems that research would have had with structured questionnaires? So there's an activity I use where I look at Alice Sullivan's research into cultural capital from 2001, and because we've done structured questionnaires before, I can say, right, what problems are we going to have with defining cultural capital? And students, because they've got that little bit of prior knowledge of doing those things, they know. The other thing as well with research methods is it doesn't have to be focused specifically on sociology. You can get them to use research methods for anything. And it really gets into the habit then of them learning through discovery, as opposed to you standing there and going, these are the strengths of this method, these are the limitations of these method, these are practical issues, these are ethical issues, which is where research methods becomes really dry. If you allow students to investigate whatever they want using a specific method and a specific set of guidelines, they become better sociologists.
Mm.
And then as you're introducing that further down the line, so you say, right, okay, well, Paul Willis did his research, and he did his research with 12 boys. What's problematic about that? What issues might he have had? How might he have had to act? And they get a little bit of a better understanding, and then that helps them with the dreaded methods in context questions because they start to think like a sociologist. So that's where I go with it. I start out with research methods, start out with a very gentle introduction, start out with what I see as being year 12 research methods, which is quantitative, qualitative, the different types of methods, PET, practical, ethical, theoretical. Then I kind of just follow the path through based on the papers. So I'd go to education and then I do my paper two, a paper two option for year one, which has varied from families to culture. And then towards the end of that year, after they've kind of had the mocks, start to do a little bit more in-depth theory, because of course you're going to come to doing crime and you're going to do your year 13 option, if you like, which will be a little bit more intense in terms of theory. And then do the second year 2 option, and then do crime. And then at the end, you're doing theory and methods almost as a recap and a revision.
Yeah.
So you're able to sort of like say, for example, you do your session on functionalism and you go, right, okay, let's look at functionalism. What have functionalists said about education? What have they said about culture? What have they said about all of these different things? And it helps you, help students to recall that information at such a critical point. At such a critical point as they're coming up to their exams, it gives them that little bit of confidence. Oh, I do remember that stuff from year 12. I do
So
remember
pulling it all
what
together.
Durkheim
Yeah.
has said. So it pulls it all together. It's almost like just nicely knits it together. Even things like when you go, right, okay, should sociology inform social policy? Stop and just sort of like say, right, where have we come across social policy in the family? What kind of type of social policies have we had? What type of social policy have we had in education? What would different groups of sociologists think about that policy? And so it does really help to tie it all together and give them a little bit of confidence when they're going into exams.
The wealth of knowledge there, yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, it's knitting it all together. And sociology is so synoptic. That's me knitting, by the way.
Mm.
I don't know what that is. It looks like I'm eating as well. But yeah, it's pulling it all
I
together. And
was kind
actually,
of
when I was
sewing
thinking,
instead of knitting, but yeah,
yeah, so
I
but
don't
that,
knit,
I
I
mean,
kind of
that's the
sew.
point.
Well,
I think, like you said, it is social, and nothing's in really isolation, and it shouldn't be, because it is, you do one, you do the other, and actually you revisit them as you go along all the time. Actually, when you were talking, I'm actually lying. I do teach a little bit of research methods to begin with, just enough so they can access that element of the education unit. So I do sort of cover, like you said, year 12 element. I do obviously revisit again when we do methods and context. And I always like the students to do a little bit of like an actual action research within education after they've taught education before we do methods and context. So I sort of go introduction, then do that, then do education, then refresh ourselves on methods again, then do carry out some research, then look at methods in context, sort of thing. Just because otherwise, if it's not like that, it can feel really abstract, like you said. And actually, when you actually carry out the research, it's not something that happens in a book.
I think that idea sort of like of action research, particularly if you do education, particularly if you have like for me in FE, we used to have this period after the mock exams where it was very floaty. Let's just say, sort of like, the year 13s had left. Lots of things were moved or cancelled because of exams and people invigilating and so on. So we would do a lot of research-based stuff in those 3-4 weeks before the summer breakup. And I think that's a really good time when students are a little bit tired. They're a little bit kind of, they've done their mocks. They're kind of a little bit tired. They're coming up to the summer. I think that's a perfect time to sort of like do that type of action research type project. And really just for you, just to almost facilitate it and just be really hands off with it and say, right, we're going to give you a topic. It's why I mean, personally, I love students doing things like EPQ alongside sociology. I think it's a fantastic qualification to do alongside sociology, because they learn all of these skills, and these skills will be really useful for them when they go on to higher education.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I think, like you said, it's not just it's also thinking. I think going back to our original question about options, it's also thinking about the season of your curriculum, and every curriculum's slightly different when they do their mocks or PPEs, or if they've got work experience. Some schools do work experience in year 12, or if you've got sort of residential trips and all that. So it's not just thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this in this sequence. It's also looking at your school calendar and thinking, is this a really short term? I know some schools have 2 weeks rather than 1 week at half. So it's really thinking about the sort of the season of your curriculum and what else is going on externally in the school.